Hello my viewers, welcome back to another Pokémon Showdown video. This time I'm covering Season 14 of the Mushi League it's a Pokemon tournament that I participated in a while ago. And this video is centered around Week 3 against Val. So for this particular week, I started kind of focusing more on using TSS teams, which are short for Toxic Spike Sandstorm teams. It's a playstyle used to spread a lot of passive damage and capitalizing on other Pokemon being weakened down so that your strong hard hitters can clean up late in the game. Although in one of the games I did not use a TSS team, I used something else. It was a ladder team I was experimenting with when I first started playing the tier. I won't go into too many specifics over the exact spreads or EVs that I ran on my team members, but but based on the replays I could show you like a general idea on how I played. And this set actually gets pretty interesting towards the end, so be sure to watch the whole thing, and you'll have a great time. Alright, enough rambling, let's get to this. So this is the first game, and what's going to happen is that there's a pretty bad opening for me where I lead with Tyranitar. So this Tyranitar is actually a physical attacking Tyranitar, so I can't necessarily stay in, because Metagross can do a lot of damage with like Meteor Mash or something. I don't remember if it was Dragon Dance or Choice Band, but I just switched into Skarmory and just dodge the Meteor Mash. Now, as with a lot of games, what happens is that Magneton's going to switch on Skarmory as Skarmory uses Spikes to rack up passive damage, and then Skarmory just gets blasted by Thunderbolt after it gets trapped from Magnapulse, so there's really not much I could do. Magneton Toxics this Tyranitar as I KO it with Earthquake, which in some cases that could have been really consequential, like if I needed Tyranitar to pivot into other attacks. But we'll figure that out later. Anyway, the Salamence uses Dragon Dance because I thought it was going to try to KO Tyranitar, but then I made a misplay here because, sorry, going a little bit too slow here. But as you saw, Zapdos flinched from a +1 Rock Slide because I was trying to paralyze it with Thunder Wave since it does not have a Lumberry and the Salamence was very threatening. And I could use like 2 Pokemon to take it out, but I didn't get a chance to do that. I did have a Swampert in the back that can take Rock Slide, but I just wasn't sure, and I did make a poor decision here. I should have switched out to Swampert after a Dragon Dance, but stupid me just decided that, oh, maybe I can use Thunder Wave to paralyze it. If I'd hidden Power Ice, it would have been more justified, but that was just not the case. So, also, Salamence on this turn could use a different move instead of Rock Slide, so it was not safe to pivot, so thus I had to sack Zapdos here. So Swampert finally comes in and threatens with Ice Beam, but instead, Val goes into Regice, which is actually a big threat on this team because you normally don't need to account for it. Regice is a rare Pokemon to find in Advanced. So I protect to scout whatever it has because it could go for like Focus Punch or something bizarre, but Regice keeps going for Ice Beam. So I send in Tyranitar to try to chip it. It takes Ice Beam not so well, and Toxic also chips it away, negating leftovers. Now Claydol comes in, takes the Rock Slide, and I thought it was going to use Rapid Spin. Usually Claydol runs leftovers, but it seems like this one had a Choice Band. It just KOs me with Earthquake, letting Spike stay on the field. Now I'm in a pretty bad position. Val lost 1 relatively useless Pokemon, and I already lost 3. So now I just have to flail at chipping down Regice here. Now, I have to stay in because I don't have anything else to absorb Ice Beam, so luckily Regice is at 8%. Now I protect to Scout Explosion, but it's still using Ice Beam. So this is kind of scary. Now Claydol comes in and dodges my Earthquake. Yeah, for the first part of this game I was playing very predictably, though I felt like I was forced to play this way because I was so far behind. Anyways, I'm protecting for leftovers recovery here. It's just spamming Earthquake, and I just finish it with Hydro Pump. Now Metagross comes in, and this is not a Choice Band set, it's just leftovers. And I protect to get more leftovers recovery, and it actually goes for Hidden Power Grass, which is really surprising. You usually see physical attacking Metagross in this tier. Now I switch in Metagross, or my Salamence on the Metagross's Hidden Power Grass, and I try to knock it out with Fire Blast, but Val suspects that and sacks Regice. Now their own Salamence comes in, and this one is Dragon Dance. So I use Dragon Claw since I know I'm faster, but it did not one-hit KO. So now it's boosting up again. This time I actually make the smart play and switch in Swampert on Rock Slide, but Swampert's getting weakened here. and I actually had to spend a couple of turns pivoting around its attacks. And I was really fortunate that Val didn't catch on and just used another Dragon Dance. So yeah, I'm speeding up the replay a little bit. But it did get pretty ugly. One crit or one bad misplay or misprediction and I would have been toast. So I had to play my cards right here. Luckily I knock out Salamence and Val sends out their Metagross again. On this turn I used Protect to get more leftovers recovery, though Val made a smart move by using Meteor Mash on the switch, or rather to catch a Salamence switch in. But I didn't want to make another prediction, so I sacrificed my Swampert here, and now Salamence comes in. Hopefully I can win a KO with Fire Blast. And Tyranitar is Val's last, which absorbs the Fire Blast. Now, I believe I use Brick Break on this next turn. And that was a risky damage range, because I know from personal experience, Brick Break does not kill Tar easily. And here's how the game ends. I miss Fire Blast crucially, which really, really upset me. And Metagross just gets the attack raised to rub it in. Earthquake does not get a critical hit, and I just lose, because primarily of bad RNG. But I'm not going to blame it on bad RNG, even though it was a contributing factor, but I did make a couple of misplays, especially with Zapdos. And Val just had some other innovations that threw me off guard. And that's the thing with Advanced League, sometimes people bring like crazy things to try to win against users that use standard teams, or teams that they expect from scouting. So, just like in the last episode, I lost the first game. Now let's see how everything else pans out. So yeah, game 1 was a little bit of a setback, and I'm going to need to redeem myself. But games 2 and 3 are where things get interesting. Let's just start with game 2. Now, game 2 is still on like the not spicy side, but it does get a little bit intense at the end. But enough stalling, let's continue. So the initial matchup is also kind of unfavorable. It's kind of the opposite of a previous matchup where I had Tyranitar and my opponent had Zapdos. Now it's the other way around. So I use Substitute on turn 1 to scout what set this is running, and it's a special attacking set with Ice Beam. I do not like facing Ice Beam Tyranitar on ladder. It is like it's just a good answer to a lot of Pokemon that would normally be used to pivot around it, like Flygon and Salamence. And Breloom is for that matter too, so I'd have to think of other ways to work around it. Now, the next turn afterwards, I actually wanted to switch out, but I did not want to reveal Baton Pass, which was actually a bad idea because usually if Zapdos has Substitute, it would have Baton Pass anyway. That's just how the metagame is played. So I actually get Pursuit Trapped, which is not a good move, but because I hard switched instead of using Baton Pass, that actually worked out in Val's favor, so that kind of sucked. I send in Metagross to scare out Tyranitar. Swampert comes in on the Meteor Mash, pretty standard stuff. And I get the attack boost, which is kind of irrelevant. And notice that the Swampert did not have leftovers. I kind of ignored that, but had Val been a little bit... Depending on the held item, things could have gotten a bit dicey. Luckily, Swampert missed Hydro Pump, the safest move they could have used on this turn. So on turn 5, I use Hidden Power Grass to kill the Swampert, because I know from past experience that Swampert can live HP Grass if it's at like 76% or higher most of the time from a standard mixed Salamence. But Val seemed to not know about that, and thus they sacked their Swampert like what I did in the previous week. Now Snorlax comes in, threatening Salamence. And even though Snorlax is not considered a good Pokemon in Advanced anymore, I still need to be very careful around it in case it sets up too many curses. So my response was using Skarmory so I can use Roar against it. Anyways, this is a free opportunity to send spikes, and just like last time, Magneton comes in on the spikes and traps me. I use Protect to prolong the inevitable, and as you're going to see, Thunderbolt's going to 1-hit KO me because this Magneton is holding a magnet instead of leftovers. I send in Claydol. Magneton uses Protect, which is interesting. You don't normally see that move on Magneton. Now Salamence comes in, dodges Earthquake. And now what happens afterwards is kind of interesting. So Val switches Magneton in, and the reason for that is that normally when Claydol is matching up against Salamence, Claydol usually explodes, and Val might have thought that I was afraid to face another Dragonite Salamence, so I wanted to explode early to prevent that from happening. Or I guess Claydol could run Ice Beam, which is incredibly rare, so thus Val sent in Magneton as their safest play. But for some reason, what I did was send in Salamence as a sort of a double switch. So that was kind of interesting. On turn 13, I knew Magneton was going to protect, so I used Brick Break without revealing Fire Blast. And Val kind of took the bait. They stayed in, and I was able to Fire Blast it. Luckily, I did not miss. So yeah, Magneton goes down. Now Salamence comes in. I thought my Salamence was faster, but Val's took Sandstorm damage first, so theirs is faster. Theirs had Rock Slide, so they had the advantage of a potential flinch. We trade blows with Dragon Claw and Rock Slide, but now I kind of have to switch out, so I switch out into Metagross on a Hidden Power Flying as a mid-ground option. Val's last Pokemon is a Metagross, so I think the best play for them was to switch in on my Meteor Mash. Salamence chips me with Earthquake, and I finish it off, getting another Meteor Mash attack boost, which is really lucky. Not that it matters, because I will have to switch out. This Metagross is not a Choice Band set, it has leftovers, and I dodge Earthquake by sending in Claydol. Now, Val's Metagross gets an attack boost, which makes things a little bit scary. I get some chip damage with Earthquake, and what I do here is I actually send in Blissey, my last Pokemon, as a sacrifice, because Blissey's not going to do anything against Val's last 3 Pokemon. Well, I forgot the Tyranitar is a special attacker, so I guess Blissey could have done something there. I don't remember the set, though, so maybe Blissey could not, if it was like something weak like Seismic Toss, and Tyranitar could have also hit Brick Break for other Tyranitars too. So the Blissey was a good sacrifice. I should not have sent in Zapdos here, because my thought process was just chipping it down with Thunderbolt so that Salamence can finish Metagross off with Brick Break instead of Fire Blast. But I did the damage calcs on turn 23, and it turns out I still needed Fire Blast to knock out Metagross. So I sacked Zapdos for nothing. Yeah, you can see I used Fire Blast. If that missed like in game 1, I would have screamed. Now Snorlax comes back, and this is where the battle goes from 0 to 100 in an instant. I have no counter for this thing anymore. So Claydol had to take a huge body slam, and Val gets the lucky paralyze here. So I make a ballsy play and use Protect to get more leftovers and to scout the set. And luckily the Snorlax has Shadow Ball. One full paralysis or one bad prediction and I would have gone bye-bye. I realized this and I chose not to pivot for a long time, so I decided my best course of action was put it in a position where one of my teammates can finish it off. I have to sack Salamence here, so I get some chip damage with Brick Break. Then Metagross comes in, and I'm going to finish it off with a Meteor Mash. For some reason, I get a third attack boost, which was really bizarre. Luckily, since my leftovers procced first, my Metagross was faster than the Tyranitar, so I was able to just hit it again with Meteor Mash, so that was pretty lucky. Because of the 2 misplays I made, this battle was a lot closer than it needed to be, but things could have also went wrong on my end in terms of RNG. The Meteor Mash boosts weren't that consequential, so it's not like I got a lot of good RNG. I mean, I got lucky against the Snorlax at the end, but it's not like I got exceptionally good luck, I just dodged bad luck at the end. Now the set is tied 1-1, and the last game is where things get really, really spicy. Spicier than a habanero. So here's the last game. This is another game where I used a TSS team, but it didn't really go to plan. So first of all, the lead is Medicham, so I got bad matchups, or I got bad openings in all 3 games. Medicham is a Pokemon you do not see often in competitive, and it has its niches, especially with Choice Band, and it also has a lot of interesting moves like Calm Mind and Recover, and I think Baton Pass too. So I had to switch out to Gengar here. And Val predicts the switch by going for Rock Slide, which is really, really good. As you'll find out later on, the team that Val has matches up really well against TSS teams, so I really had to be on my A game in order to win. If I win. I mean, it's 1-1, anything can happen. So yeah, I tried to Will-O-Wisp Medicham, but Snorlax actually comes in, and it gets chipped. Unlike Game 2, I'm not too worried about this Snorlax. So what I do next is I send in Fortress in case it goes for Shadow Ball, and yes, this Snorlax does have Shadow Ball. So Fortress is pretty much free to set up spikes here. And that's what I do. Oh, hold on, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So yeah, I use spikes. Now I sent in Suicune here because I figured Heracross would set up Swords Dance, or in this case Substitute, or if it did try to use like Brick Break or Focus Punch, Suicune is like my bulkiest mon, and Gengar is kind of frail and it would have been thwarted by Substitute, so Suicune was my best play here. And I planned on roaring. Heracross figures this out, so it tries to Mega Horn for a sizable chunk, and I roar it out into Metagross. So this Metagross was actually kind of threatening to my team because I didn't really know what it was going to run. Fortress was my safest switch, as you will see. And it actually goes for Thunder Punch, which was really shocking, no pun intended. Like, I was panicking because, like, what if it had HP Fire, or Hidden Power Fire? Because then Fortress would have been scorched up as well. But I had to take a risk and go for Earthquake. Heracross actually comes back in and takes more Spikes damage. I couldn't afford to switch out again. So in the next turn, I actually reveal Zap Cannon as Heracross uses Swords Dance, and I get the lucky para. Well, not lucky para, but I was lucky that the move hit, and it guarantees it paralysis. So I neutralize the Heracross, so it can't really do a lot of damage to my team. Slackberry procs, as you're going to see, but because paralysis is so brutal in this generation, up until Generation 7, even a +1 Heracross cannot outspeed my Fortress, a very slow Pokemon while paralyzed, so I'm free to Earthquake and knock it out. And now Tyranitar comes in, and if Tyranitar is coming against the Fortress, you better be certain that it has Fire Blast or Flamethrower, so I had to switch out to Flygon. But actually, it has Dragon Dance, which took me by surprise. But I guess it makes sense for this team style. But if you're coming in against a Fortress, you're most likely going to out yourself as being a special attacker. But good on Val for tripping me up. Flygon's a good check to Tyranitar, or Dragon Dance Tyranitar, but it Rock Slides on this turn, so I'm getting the implication that it does not have Ice Beam. So I used Protect to scout the first attacking move, though a second Dragon Dance would have been brutal. Now it actually has Hidden Power Bug as its auxiliary fourth move, so Earthquake's going to be a 2-hit KO. I use Protect to scout for more leftovers recovery, and I do not get flinched by Rock Slide, so Earthquake finishes off Tyranitar. And now Scizor comes in. Scizor is a Pokemon that I almost never see on ladder, and apparently there's only really one realistic thing Scizor does in this metagame, but I didn't really catch on to it until a couple turns later. I thought this was going to be like a Swords Dance +3 attack set, or Swords Dance plus Agility +2 attacks, so I was worried about things like Steel Wing, Hidden Power Bug, and I guess Brick Break to an extent. And my only really safe option against this thing was Fortress, but I wanted to use Fortress against Snorlax and Medicham, and potentially Metagross as well, depending on the set. So Fortress was pretty much out of the question here. So I used Earthquake right as Scizor uses Swords Dance, and as you saw, Earthquake did 45%. But I did the damage calc on this turn, and I know that Earthquake was not going to finish off the Scizor 100% of the time. Even like, and especially if it had leftovers, but it did not. I'm assuming this thing had Lum Berry or something, because it just does not want to get crippled by Will-O-Wisp or Thunder Wave. So I knew not to finish it off with Earthquake, but I did not know who to send in, because like Gengar can take a lot of damage from Steel Wing. Fortress I want to save for another Pokemon, and Fortress can't really do a lot to Scizor. Suicune was kind of weakened, so I didn't want to take in Power Bug damage. I could have stayed in with Flygon, but I already ruled that out. And my last is a Celebi, and that's weak to Bug. So I had to send in Tyranitar on this next turn. So yeah, I sent in Tyranitar because I had to sack. But Scizor goes for Endure, thinking that I was going to bring it to 1 HP. And it suddenly clicked in my head, oh shoot, the Scizor was Swords Dance plus Endure plus Reversal, and then some auxiliary stab move. And I don't even get to know its stab move here, so this really stressed me out, because Scizor is pretty unpredictable, at least in this situation, and one bad prediction I would have been screwed. I would have been swept. But it used Endure, so that was a little bit of a relief. Now on this turn, Scizor uses Reversal, and I survive at 8%. Val assumed Reversal would 1-hit KO, but they should have damage calced to verify that. They would have found out that Hidden Power Bug or Steel Wing would have 1-hit KO'd from full health. I was not expecting to live that. Intending to sacrifice this Tyranitar, because this Tyranitar can't do anything to the rest of Val's team, and I go for Roar, to nullify the Swords Dance boost. I did have Fire Blast and I could have tried to knock it out, but what if Scizor used Endure again? That would have not been fun. So yeah, Medicham comes in, and I'm intending on sacrificing this Tyranitar. It goes for Rock Slide, predicting the Gengar switch again, but Medicham did not get that fortunate. So this Medicham actually has Bulk Up, so that was a little bit shocking. And I used Earthquake to chip it, and now on this next turn, I get chipped with Brick Break, and I miss Zap Cannon. Trivial. So yeah, Fortress kind of can't really do anything. I guess I could have saved it, but I could have probably saved it for Snorlax or Scizor had I done things differently. And I did not want to switch on Gengar because of a bad prediction. And I know from damage calcing that Thunderbolt is going to knock out Medicham at this range. But what happens instead is that Snorlax comes back in on the Thunderbolt. And yeah, good for Val. And what I'm going to do instead is switch in Suicune. And Snorlax tries to KO Gengar again, but nah, Suicune just eats up Shadow Ball. So this play was questionable. I actually go for Roar here, and Snorlax just self-destructs. I wasn't expecting it to use Explosion, but in hindsight, I probably should have. Snorlax typically runs self-destruct, but it doesn't always do that. It could have been Curse, plus Rest, plus a normal move in Shadow Ball. I wouldn't have known. So I thought it was going to be a Curse set, so that's why I used Roar. And I could have roared on the rest. Suicune's Surf could not finish Snorlax off at this range, so self-destruct was kind of inevitable. It's whatever. Suicune goes down when it probably shouldn't have. So now Gengar comes in on Scizor. I did the damage calcs on Scizor as well from this range. Thunderbolt does guarantee a knockout. And now Metagross comes back in, and I did not really know what other moves it was running besides Thunder Punch, so I just decided to Will-O-Wisp. Maybe it's going to go for Meteor Mash. And it actually is Psychic, which was really shocking as well. Like, this is a special attacking Metagross on a team filled with physical attackers. So I was a little bit taken aback by this. So I sent in Celebi here. And I could have sent in Flygon, but I was worried that this Metagross had Ice Punch. So I just had to send in Celebi here and hope for the best. So yeah, I use Leech Seed and I miss. And this Metagross goes for Pursuit. It didn't reveal Pursuit earlier in the game, so it could have tried to do some shenanigans there against my Gengar, but instead Gengar got a couple of knockouts. So Val probably could have played a little bit better with their Pursuit Metagross, but Pursuit Metagross is kind of rare. I've seen it once in Ubers, but that's about it. Usually if you want a Pursuit Pokemon, you use Houndoom or Tyranitar. Anyways, on the next turn, I have to wait through for this. On the next turn, I miss Leech Seed again, but it goes for Pursuit. Does this really not have anything better to use? I guess it just doesn't have Ice Punch or Hidden Power Fire, and Pursuit is its best attack, which is kind of ironic for a Metagross. So I just Recover Stall, and letting the Burn status do its thing. I have nothing to worry about, right? Leech Seed finally hits, but Metagross explodes. But I survive, and that is actually pretty pivotal. So Medicham takes Spikes and Sandstorm on this turn, so yeah, it's going to die in a couple of turns. Slackberry procs instead of a Lumberry, and it knocks out Celebi. But that's okay, because Medicham is going to be defenseless. It's at 3% now, and I can just use Protect and win the game. So yeah, it was a very close match, and it was very, very intense. There was a lot of unpredictability here, and Val was doing their hardest to try to catch me off guard with this physically offensive-oriented team that matches up well against the style that I normally use, Toxic Spikes plus Sandstorm. Though I didn't use Toxic because Flygon never had an opportunity to use it. When I first played this particular game, I thought that I was throwing at the end because I was just losing Pokemon left and right, like Suicune and Celebi. And I was just like, I thought I had everything going after I shut down that sweep from the Scizor. But it just turns out that I kind of got spared by the Metagross having a very questionable set and a poor matchup against my Celebi. Even though I missed like 2 Leech Seeds, it didn't really matter. And I was also fortunate that there was no Rapid Spinner on Val's team, so the Spikes damage actually mattered a lot, especially against Scizor, Heracross, and Medicham. Like all the heavy hitters. And coupled with Spikes, this is like one prime example of why like TSS is like a team style that you should not take lightly. Like, even though spikes can only do 12.5% damage with one layer up, and sandstorm takes 6.25% each turn, and that's usually nullified with leftovers, every single bit of chip damage in these older generations add up. And my heavy hitters like Gengar and Suicune would greatly appreciate the extra damage that their teammates have inflicted, just so that they can easily KO their targets, even with moves that aren't necessarily super effective, like Gengar's Thunderbolt, for example. So yeah, this was my second win of Season 14 of the Mushi League, and this is actually a pretty fun game to play, even though I was like really stressed out again, but it was very, very exhilarating. Alright folks, I don't really have much more to say, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the last video as well. I played 2 more times in this season, and I'll probably put those 2 in one episode, but you'll have to stay tuned for that. Anyways, my viewers, take care of yourselves and have a great day or night.